Hello, everyone. Welcome to the LA Confidential Podcast. My name is Aaron Elliott, and I'm here with Christopher Elliott. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. Wow, that was really fast. You've had a lot of tea this morning,
Oh,
Aaron.
definitely.
All right, we
Oh,
are in
boy.
Stockholm, Sweden.
Yes.
Yeah. What do you think?
Well, it's definitely an interesting city. Reminds me a lot of other places.
Yeah, well, what does it remind you of?
Minnesota,
Oh,
and then also Southern Canada, like not
yeah.
Calgary, but Winnipeg. Yeah.
Yeah, like Thunder Bay, around
Yeah.
there. Yeah. It reminds us of a lot of places we've been to. But we've been to some places in Sweden that not a lot of folks go to. So that brings us to this week's question, which is, what is the last place you went to that was kind of undiscovered, a hidden gem? So unappreciated destinations that a lot of people don't go to, but that you really liked. I would love to hear about your latest hidden gem, and I know we've got a couple. Like, what do you think is a good hidden gem that we've been to recently?
I think we should get back to that because if we answer the questions too quickly, we won't.
We'll have nothing to talk
Yeah, we'll
about.
have nothing to talk about.
All right,
So let's talk about
fair enough.
the hidden gem. Well, one of the hidden gems, which is Sweden.
Sweden is in itself a hidden gem. Well, okay. Uh, yeah, let's go there because I think that there's something about Sweden, like they don't really like to brag here.
Yes.
So everything is like, oh yeah, no, that's we're just a little country here, Don't look here. But they really have a great country. They have a lot of really cool things going on. But it's a Scandinavian thing to not brag too much.
Mm-hmm.
And so as a result, you wouldn't know that this is a great place to visit.
Yeah, getting into the national psyche is a really hard thing. But you know what? This place is super understated. I have to say,
It is.
you know, I walk through the streets, I talk to the people, I interact, well, in what limited ways that a tourist can, and it does feel very subdued, even though you're in a massive country,
Hmm.
and it's a massive country that has a lot to offer too.
It does. We should start with Stockholm because we've been here for a couple of days. We started our tour in Stockholm and we stayed at a place called the Bank Hotel, which is a renovated bank, and we were very close to all the museums.
Yeah.
So we saw a ton of museums.
Yeah, the museums here are world class, and there's some really interesting things. Like, for example, in the Baltic Sea, because there are no woodworms, there are whole wrecks that are just fully intact. And so one of those wrecks they were able to recreate, and that's the Vasamuseet or something. I don't know how to
Wow,
speak
that's
Swedish.
good on the Swedish there.
Yeah, but it's a really cool museum. They
Yeah.
essentially rebuilt from scraps this whole ship, and it is really incredible to look at.
Yeah.
And it's also a cool museum, literally and figuratively.
It is a few degrees cooler than outside because they have to keep that. I guess they keep the whole museum air conditioned.
Yeah.
And it is an amazing, huge ship that they have dredged up and then put on display here.
Exactly.
But there are so many other really great museums. I love the technical museum that we went to.
Yes, for one particular reason, which we'll discuss further also, because this is a sort of theme,
Yes.
I think, of our stay, is this wood structure. It's like a pavilion, but it has this, it's a wood pavilion with a wooden dome inside it, and there's this space carved out in the ceiling for the wooden dome. So it's a sort of a curve. You know how those airports in like Qatar are, where they have this curved, almost hangar
Yeah.
sort of appearance? They did the same thing, but just for this particular wooden sphere.
It's called the Whiz Dome, and it is made entirely out of wood. Inside the dome, there's a multimedia presentation, but the outside is an engineering marvel. It's made entirely of wood, and it stands, even though it probably, you look at it, you're like, wow, where are the supports? There are no supports. It's all computer assisted design, and it all works.
Yeah.
We've seen a lot of really cool architecture while we've been here.
Yeah.
I think that we should talk a little bit about sustainability because I'm working on a story about that, and I'll have some of the stories soon. Everyone in Sweden loves to talk about sustainability. Every museum has a sustainability program. We went to the National Museum. I'm sorry, this is the Nordic Museum. We did also go to the National Museum. The Nordic Museum also has a display, a whole exhibit on the melting Arctic ice. That's a big deal here because everything is getting warmer, and so they're very concerned, obviously, about the ice melting.
Yeah. And I think the most interesting part about it is it shows this history. Well, rather, it reframes the melting of the ice caps and all that within Nordic and Inuit folklore and mythology. And I think that's really interesting because it brings a perspective that's not the same as, oh, the world is getting warmer and the ice caps are melting and it's the end.
Yeah.
But it's more like it has a different perspective on that particular aspect of catastrophic global warming and sea level rising.
Yeah, yeah. And people are still managing to exist up there, so it's not like it's the end of the world for them, but it's definitely a lifestyle change. Describe what Stockholm is like in the summertime. I think that we probably should have started there, but let's not miss a chance to describe what it's like.
Yeah. Stockholm's a really bright city. I mean, the weather is pretty variable still, even though, I mean, it's not like the Caribbean where it's just always going to be sunny, or Arizona. It's not like that.
No,
but
it's definitely a northern climate.
The sun is out all the freaking time.
Yes.
Like from 3 all the way into like 10 p.m. sometimes. It's crazy. And if you go north, it's even worse.
Yeah, or better if you like daylight. Yeah, it's the weather is tempered. It's mild right now, and there's a lot of daylight. And so if you want to be in a place where you can stay out until 10 o'clock without worrying about it getting dark, come to Stockholm at this time of the year, and you will have plenty of daylight.
Absolutely. And so the weather here is nice. Sometimes it gets a little hot, but it's definitely very comfortable. Much more comfortable than if it were like -20. So
my overall impressions of Stockholm is that it's if you like museums and if you're a fan of Nordic culture, you have to come here. Absolutely. And if you like Scandinavian food, it's a really good place. We actually discovered some good places where they have plant-based food as well. And there are places that do good Scandinavian plant-based food too. But overall, they do have a pretty good restaurant scene here if you're into this kind of food. If you like spicy food, there are probably other places that you could go because they don't really like do the spices, but they do really good like baked goods like cinnamon rolls.
Yeah. Which brings us to our next destination, which after we went from
Skellefteå.
Yeah, after we were in Stockholm, we went to a place called Skellefteå.
Okay, I know I mispronounced that, sorry.
Or they also call it Skellefteå.
Skellefteå, yes.
Skellefteå
is only about 200 kilometers from the Arctic Circle. But it is a totally green destination. Like they've really gone overboard almost on sustainability and environmental things. And Aaron, can you just set the scene here? How environmentally aware are they there?
Well, the thing is, it's not something that's tourist facing.
Yeah, right.
So you're not going to see it, but it's like many other European destinations. They have the recycling programs. They have green energy. For example, Skellefteå, Skellefteå Kraft. It's something like that. That's the power, and it's all not geothermal, but rather it's hydro.
Hydroelectric. They also have a huge new battery plant.
Yes.
Called it's basically a gigafactory where they're recycling lithium-ion batteries. They have a Green Flight Academy where they're teaching people how to fly electric planes.
Yes, and they have the Piste de Résistance, which is the
Wood Hotel. Yes,
it's the high-rise for Skellefteå. It is the Wood Hotel, and it is a 30-story building. Sorry, 20-story.
Yeah,
it's a 20-story building made entirely out of wood.
Now, here's the thing: is you used to not be able to build wood very high
legally
because of the fire hazard. So how did they get around that?
Well, they have new wood processing techniques where cross-laminated wood is easier to control, and also it's much more predictable, and in some cases much more safe than steel and concrete.
Yes.
And also, it's much more efficient because you can do everything prefabricated, which in Europe is not a bad word, actually. They love prefab. And so they can essentially assemble this hotel on the cheap in a prefab facility, bring over each room or each part of the hotel individually,
Yeah, just
and then
set
crane it up and
Right.
set it up.
Yeah, yeah.
And what they have is a really interesting modern hotel. It's not the sort of rustic vibe that you'd get in like an old cabin,
Yeah,
but it's there.
exactly. When I thought of a wood hotel and someone said that they had built a wood hotel, I thought, oh, it's going to be a log cabin. It's not. It's not like something that you would see in Colorado or Wyoming, where it's logs that have been like piled on top of each other, and it's just a 1 or 2 story log cabin. This is a huge hotel. It's like a high rise, but it's made of wood. So you walk in, and the rooms are made out of wood, the floors, the ceiling, it's all wood. And they have a really interesting looking, highly proprietary, they wouldn't let us take pictures of it, um, a system that allows the heat to be recycled, and it saves on energy and things like that. It's really, really interesting.
And one of the things that people are working on in Stockholm right now is something called the Wood City, which I've only heard bits and pieces about, but supposedly they're going to build not 20 stories, but a 60-story
Yes.
wooden building.
Yeah.
The same architects.
Right, and we had a chance to actually meet with these architects when we were in Stockholm, and I would say they're a little bit like anarchists. They're going against the grain, no pun intended, because they're building out of wood. Everyone else is still doing concrete and steel, and they're like, no, let's use wood. This is the future, and they're pulling it off. I mean, I was really impressed by the Wood Hotel, and I thought that whole thing. Really interesting side note is that Wood Hotel is not really just a hotel, it's also a library and a community center. So it's actually the heart of the city.
Yeah, absolutely.
So then we also went out to another town. I'm not even going to try to pronounce the names.
Granö.
Thank you.
Granö.
Thank you very much.
We went to a place called Granö, or Granö, whatever. It's
And
Grano umlaut.
what a fascinating backstory, because they were losing population, and the authorities wanted to close down the school. And then what happened, Aaron?
Well, someone decided that they were going to build business to attract people and tourists, so that way they could keep the school. So that way people wouldn't eventually leave the town and make it a ghost town.
That's right. And so they built the centerpiece, I would say, are these treehouse hotel rooms. And we got a chance to stay in one. What was that like?
That was pretty interesting. I think that these buildings were very rustic, and being in Sweden, of course, in summer everything is so bright, so we had to figure out how to
close the
curtains, which is a bit difficult. But I think that the part that I liked most about it wasn't really the hotel room, but it was just the really small community around it. They have the best grocery store in all of Sweden right there.
Yes.
And the best grocery store in all of Sweden actually it's a self-checkout place. So there's essentially no one working there, unless you need someone. And it's a cafe too, and it's open 24/7, and it has a lot of very interesting things.
Yeah. But you know what though? Everyone in town there is on the trust system, because we went to a bakery, and let me tell you, the bread there was really good. It was like the best we'd had in Sweden, and we went there. And it was also on the honor system. Like you went in there and you just swiped your credit card and took whatever you wanted.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that that's the part that I really like so much about it, is you feel trusted, and you also get this sense of community where it's like you don't even have to have lived there in order to feel welcome.
Yeah, no, absolutely. From there, we went south. We went to Gothenburg, and I know I mispronounce it, but that you pronounce it differently in Swedish.
Göteborg.
Göteborg. Yeah, thank you.
Göteborg.
And Göteborg is actually one of the most, if not the most, sustainable city. We had a chance to sit down with their head of sustainability and talk about some of the things they've been doing. And I was really surprised to learn that their initiatives go back almost 24 years, maybe longer than that, where they've been thinking about ways to improve sustainability and make sure that they're not destroying the environment. These are all really important things. I know they've become very politicized, but in Sweden, people really are very interested in ensuring that whatever they have is going to be there for the next generation. What
Hmm.
were your impressions of Gothenburg?
Well, Gothenburg was it was like Stockholm, except that it was even more chill. And I don't know what else to really make of it. We stayed right next to the central station, Gothenburg Central Station, and everything was very tightly packed together. They have a really good tram system, and especially right next to Central Station, there's a lot of shopping. So if you want to do a lot of shopping,
Mm-hmm.
I think that that's really the place to be. Also, they have nice parks, a nice river to walk by, and also Volvo is based there.
That's
So,
true, yeah. Gothenburg is one of the best walking cities that I've ever visited. And it is, well, it's not a good walking city if you have rolling luggage because there's so many cobblestones. And as you know, cobblestones are the natural enemy of rolling luggage.
mhm.
But if you're just walking, it is great. You've got all these canals, and then you've got the port, and you have really beautiful, well preserved buildings, museums. It is like if you want European culture, and also it's a southern city, so it's a little, the vibe is a little bit friendlier.
Yeah.
I thought I thought Gothenburg was really great, and you can get a really nice high speed train from Gothenburg back to Stockholm,
Which is
and
where we are now.
which we've come back. We're actually living in our friend Doug's basement now.
Yes.
Thank you, Doug, for letting us live in your basement. Um, so overall, what are your impressions of Sweden?
Well, Sweden, I think it's really hard because I feel like no matter how much time I spend, there's a certain sense of there's a lack of familiarity that I feel towards maybe the architecture, where I kind of feel like there's still so much to explore, so much that's unknown, so much that I haven't seen. So it's really hard for me to say, like, oh, I know what Sweden is like. It's like this. It's really difficult to say that. But I think that from what I've seen so far, there's a lot that you can see, a lot of enjoyable experiences that you can have here. And I think from the perspective of a tourist,
Mm-hmm.
like there are certain things that if you're into, you're probably gonna like Sweden a lot. Like for example, the whole concept of fika.
Oh yes,
I think that a
this is like
lot of
a
people like that.
afternoon tea.
Coffee, afternoon coffee, and you have it with cinnamon rolls and whatnot, and it's a whole food thing. And there's a lot of that. If you're here and you really like that sort of Swedish baked goods, um, you like walking around the city in sort of like an urban, and I don't know what to liken it to, but it feels, I don't know, maybe you can help me describe this. What does Stockholm feel most like to you? Or just Sweden being in the city, what does it feel like to you?
Well, I don't know. I mean, it's got a little bit of the Venice vibe because of the all the water.
Mm-hmm.
I don't mean Venice, California. I mean like Venice, Italy.
Obviously.
And it has a little bit of the German vibe too, because it's Scandinavian, so there's a lot of, it's very angular and very tidy, and um, there's a big emphasis on design too. But the thing about Sweden that I find really a little bit of a mystery is the Swedish, and indeed the Scandinavian mentality of how do you read people, and people are a little bit reserved and they talk a little bit differently, but Swedish is also almost mutually intelligible. Like you can understand every second or third word, so you think you understand what people are saying, but you really kind of don't understand what they're saying either. And anyway, I I think that it's Sweden is a little bit of a black box to me, but not in a bad way. It's like it's I find it intriguing,
Mm-hmm.
and so my takeaway from Sweden is that we've been here for 2 weeks, and I would love to come back and explore more because I think that for me one of the highlights was taking a road trip with you.
Mm-hmm.
We drove 2 hours out to get to the treehouse, and that was, oh, it was just so beautiful. It was so the countryside. It really reminded me so much of Minnesota, in so many different ways. So this is one of those destinations where I would want to go back because I think there's more to see.
Yeah.
And so that's my overall impression.
Any surprising or delightful discoveries, surprise and delight,
Surprise and delight.
that you've made here?
Shock and delight. That's a hard question, Aaron. That's a really, really hard question.
I can answer the question.
Oh, please do, yeah.
So I've discovered Swedish bread. A lot of people are familiar with Vasa, the W-A-S-A.
It's the food, of course.
Of course.
Yeah.
But here there's a brand called Leksands, and they have this type of bread that has flax seeds and some sort of malt.
Yeah.
And it's really, really good. And I think that, unfortunately, some of the hotels we stayed at, they had like this Arctic bread. And a lot of it tasted very, how can I say, it's not dry, but it didn't taste very crispy. It sort of tasted like cardboardy and dry. But if you get the fresh stuff from the grocery store, it's really cheap too. It's really nice actually to eat.
I'm going to look for
bread.
that when we leave, maybe in our next place, because we're headed to Finland next.
Yes.
Our question of the week, which you promised that we would come back to, so we're doing that, is favorite recent hidden gems.
Yes.
And I know it's a little bit of a cliche question, but there's a reason why it's a cliche, because people love talking about hidden gems and places that they can go to. So Aaron, what are your favorite hidden gems?
Well, I don't want to spoil too many of them, but I think that the best hidden gem was one that we talked about yesterday, which was Šmirka, on the border between on Czech and Germany.
Yeah.
And I think that that's something that
was in our last podcast.
I don't remember anyone talking about that. Yeah, and that was on our last podcast. I don't remember anyone talking about that, but it was such a beautiful place. I can't imagine that can go undiscovered for very much longer in the American circles.
And for U.S. destinations, you had also mentioned Colorado National Monument. Yeah. We lived in Fruita for about a month.
And also Palisades, which is right next by.
Yeah, and almost no one goes there. And by almost no one, I looked up the statistics. It's less than 500,000 people a year that go to
Colorado National Monument.
Yeah, to the Colorado National Monument, and that is not a lot of people compared to some of the other national parks.
Yeah.
My favorite time to be in Palisades is the late summer, because you have all the peaches that are being harvested,
and they're good price too.
They are delicious.
Yeah, it's like it is the perfect place. It's so nice. We stayed in Fruita, which is like very suburban, and you wake up every morning and you see Colorado National Monument, and then on the other side on your side of the what is the Colorado River? Yeah, it's the Colorado River that's going through. On the other side of the Colorado River, it's just flat, and I think that it's so cool because you're right next to an alpine area. If you go up or really south into Colorado, you get this alpine weather, and things are cool, but then they get really hot. So it's like 33 degrees Celsius, which is like almost 90 every day. And you'll have the best peaches in all of Colorado.
Yeah. In all of the United States, I would say. It's really, these are excellent peaches. They have a really tart flavor, and they're not too sweet too. Like, they're not overpoweringly sweet. In our last podcast, which came from Eastern Germany, we asked what was the worst destination dupe that you've ever visited. And we had a couple of interesting responses to that. Mickey says, Epcot's International Dining section. Those restaurants are nothing like the authentic ones, but thousands and maybe millions of people think that they are.
Of course, but it's Disney. They're selling a product, and I guess the idea is that they're selling Americanized versions, which is like really not that uncommon. Americans are obsessed, as many other countries are, of course, with cuisine that's not from theirs. So you can get like Tex-Mex cuisine, for example, in Florida, but Tex-Mex cuisine there versus in Switzerland is going to be very different, obviously. And it's the same thing. Like, you're not going to get authentic Italian food in Epcot's dining section, or French food, or anything at all.
Anything. I have this theory about Disney because we used to live in Orlando. We lived there for 12 years. And I think that it is not, it is its own unique product. It's not you're not going to go to Epcot and find authentic French food. It's something else. It's like almost an amalgamation, a totally different product. But it's unique and special in its own way. And there's a reason why people go there. And I don't think they go there to experience. I mean, I'm sure there are some people who think, oh, this is like authentically French. But I think there are people who go there because it's authentically Disney, and it's very authentically Disney.
Oh yeah. Well, some of the food is really good there.
Oh, it's good food. Yeah. I mean, not all of it, but we've been there enough times, and we've eaten in Epcot at Epcot a lot, and they do. I like the one over at the hydroponic. What is it called? The World. They have a good restaurant.
Yeah.
Like
that one. Oh, where Soren is.
Yeah.
Yeah. I like that place. It's such a good vibe. I don't know. I've never seen a place. I mean, Disney does vibes really well.
They do good. They
Either
do
that
vibes.
or I grew up there, and so I feel like they have good vibes, but they really don't.
We took you there every weekend.
No.
All right, let's do one more comment. Joyce says, anything in Las Vegas. I don't even want a flight connection through Vegas. Okay.
That's pretty crazy.
Defense of Las Vegas. When she says Vegas, she really means Paradise, Nevada, which is where all those high-rise hotels are. But I don't think of that when I think of Las Vegas. I think of, downtown Las Vegas, which is a little bit more authentic. And I think of like the areas around there where people can go hiking and mountain biking, things like that. But it's true that Vegas is a little bit, as they say in German, Ersatz. It's artificial. Well, that's about it from here. We are headed off to our next destination, which is Helsinki. Don't forget to answer our question of the week. We would love to talk about your comments in our next podcast, which will be from, I think it's going to be Helsinki or Tampere, one of those two.
Tampere.
Tampere.
Probably Helsinki.
Helsinki. All right. Thanks for joining us, guys, and we'll see you soon.